So we left off with the paradox of the barber of Seville. Does he shave himself or not? And as I said, it's not just some funky play on words. It gets to an inherent limit of human knowledge. It brings you to a point where it says, on any human knowledge, there's only so far we could go, and then we run into paradoxes. We run into what's called the self-referential paradox. Now, this really got formalized. This really got the big boost from a strange little Austrian fella who's actually kind of my hero. In many ways, he is my secular hero. He's an Austrian, of all things, my hero, but that's another issue. His name is Kurt Gödel. And Gödel came up with this called his famous Incompleteness Theorem. And in a gist, what this man proved, he proved, is that you basically can never utterly prove the absolute consistency or the absolute completeness of formal mathematics. Now, again, think about this. You're thinking of formal mathematics. You're thinking you got your axioms and you build your whole system of truth based on this. It's like pure deduction. It's pure deduction, no guesswork. And I mean, here's where you got, supposedly you got absolute solid truths all the way through. And yet Gödel's formula, in essence, he proved that there are certain things that you can never prove using the system itself, whatever system you're in. You can go outside of that system and with a new system and start proving rules within that system, and that's fine. But then how do you prove the rules of the system you're outside of? You can't. You have to go outside of that, and you go on and on and on in infinite regress. Now, the point is, and this is very heavy, is that what he's saying is that even mathematics itself remains incomplete, and that there are aspects of math you can never totally prove. And he proved that you can't prove that. To me, it's incredible that something as absolutely solid and supposedly with all the certainty as mathematics comes with certain inherent, inescapable contingencies. In other words, you might be able to look at something, you might be able to know it, you might be able to believe it, but guess what, folks? You can't prove it. And we're talking math here now. We're not talking whether there's a God. We're talking math. I like what this one mathematician, Morris Klein, said, talking about Gödel's work. He said the one distinguishing feature of mathematics that it might have claimed this century, the absolute certainty of its results could no longer be claimed. Again, we're talking math here. And I want to give you a quote from Bertrand Russell. And again, he's talking about math. And this is the part that blows my mind. This is a quote that just is amazing to me. And I was just at Cambridge and I got to see where Russell worked, and it's kind of a thrill to me. Anyway, listen to this quote. I wanted certainty in the kind of way in which people want religious faith. I thought that certainty is more likely to be found in mathematics than anywhere else. See, that's interesting because they say that all philosophy is people looking for certainty. And he's saying he thinks he could find it in math. But I discovered that many mathematical demonstrations, which my teachers expected me to accept, were full of fallacies, and that if certainty were indeed discoverable in mathematics, it would be in a new field of mathematics, with more solid foundation than those hitherto thought secure. But as the work proceeded, I was continually reminded of the fable about the elephant and the tortoise. Having constructed an elephant upon which the mathematical world could rest, I found the elephant tottering and proceeded to construct a tortoise to keep the elephant from falling. But the tortoise was no more secure than the elephant. And listen to this. And after some 20 years of very arduous toil, I came to the conclusion that there was nothing more I could do in the way of making mathematical knowledge indubitable. This is unbelievable. We're talking mathematics here, folks. We're not talking some flighty metaphysics. We're not talking religion. He's talking about mathematics. Now, what is the point in all this? Where am I going with this little bit? Showing that the foundations of geometry weren't what we thought, showing that that math itself wasn't logical, and then Kurt Gödel kicking it out, and even here we've got Bertrand Russell, one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century, basically saying he can't make math solid. I guess my point is something like math has to be taken to a certain degree on faith. I'm not going to get all bent out of shape because certain things about God and the existence of God I can't prove. I have to take them on faith as well. I mean, if you're going to have to take math on faith, okay, if you're going to take about math, what about something like God? You know, I read a book by a guy named John Polkinghorne. I think he's a British astrophysicist and cleric or something. And I like when Polkinghorne says, if we cannot even prove the consistency of arithmetic, it seems a bit much to hope that God's existence is easier to deal with. Now, can you see the point here? You can never prove that parallel lines never meet, much less that God exists, or that Jesus died on the cross for all my sins and I can stand pardoned. How can I prove that? I can't. I can be sure of it, I can believe it, but it doesn't necessarily mean I can prove it. But see, the question is, so what? So what? Even mathematics. If I can't have absolute proof about mathematics, I'm going to reject my belief in God because I can't absolutely prove it as well. You know, I reject promises in the Bible because how do you prove some of these things? How do you prove when, again, you can't even prove mathematics? And I thought that was quite a revelatory thing for me when it hit me one day to suddenly realize that, because you see, a lot of the great philosophers of the 20th century were mathematicians. Or they studied math because, as I said earlier, the idea for mathematicians is people want absolute certainty. What can you boom, 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 boom? What can you know? And know that you know it and know that absolutely it's true. And they thought they're going to find it in mathematics. If you're going to find it anywhere, you're going to find it in math. And sure enough, where the 20th century came along and they kicked out even the utter foundations of absolute certainty through math, in math as well. And so I guess the question is, if you can't have absolute certainty in math, what about anything else in life? What do you know? What do you believe that you're absolutely certain of? What do you believe that you could prove? You can believe it enough to live your life that way. And you can live your life that way if you stop and think about all the things that you believe, that you trust your life with, things that you believe are right and that you absolutely can't prove, you would be surprised. And I guess it just comes back to what ultimately are the limits of human knowledge. We are 21st century beings and we've gone to the moon, and I could pick up my cell phone and call anybody around in the world, and it's a marvelous about all the things that technology has given us. And yet, with every one of these things, there are very deep mysteries, things that we don't fully understand. And again, if you have that even with something like mathematics, how much more so would it be things like something like faith? And that's the amazing thing about this discovery about, the stuff. I remember telling my wife when my son was studying geometry, said, my dad said all the stuff you're teaching me in geometry isn't true anyway, because it's really not. Euclidean space doesn't really explain the way the world is. And this was something that we thought was so absolute, firm, and solid. And if something like that isn't as absolute and needs to be taken on faith, well, there might be other things we need to take on faith as well.
We have a great heritage. So great, some people say we should just rewind. But what if we tried something else? Keep the mission, but contextualize it for today. Keep the message, but in words we can experience. Keep the spirit, and live it an authentic everyday life. You can't rewind to the past, but you can reframe how you live in the present. CSPS, Authentic Adventist Resources as you reach today's world. Reframe.info.
Yes, it really was quite amazing to me to suddenly discover that supposedly something as rock solid and immovable as mathematics really isn't. And it has to be taken on faith. You know, it reminds me of a story in the Bible after Jesus was resurrected and Thomas didn't believe it. And Thomas finally says, let me feel you. And so Jesus says, stick your finger on, grab me and stick your finger in my wounds. And then finally Thomas does, and Jesus says, okay, blessed are you that you have seen me and you believed. And then Jesus says something very interesting. He said, blessed are they that have not seen and have yet believed. And you know, there's a lot I haven't seen, and there's a lot I do not understand about anything. But I thank God for the gift of faith, for belief in what I don't fully understand and certainly can't, quote, prove.